This conference will now be recorded.
And this meeting of the Oil and Gas Conservation Commission is called to order. Roll call, please.
Dale Nations.
Stephen Cooper.
Bill Fire-Robin.
Frank Thorwald. Mike, are you there? Are you online?
I am here, sorry. Mute. Mike Conway's here.
Fantastic. We have a quorum. Item 2. Does anybody have any changes on the minutes from our November 19th meeting? Any discussion on that meeting's the minutes?
Mr. Chair, I note that you did not call to establish any conflicts of interest. I don't have any. I'm sure that no one else does, but it is on the agenda.
You're very right. Thank you very much. Does anybody have a conflict of interest? Hearing none, we will move on to item 2. Sorry. Hearing no changes, does anybody have a motion to approve the minutes?
I move to approve the minutes of the November 19th, 2021 minutes as presented.
Thank you, Dale. Thank you. Who seconded it?
Mike.
Okay, great. If you could all say your name up front, it'd be easier for me.
Sorry.
That's all. All in favor of approving the November 19th minutes, say aye.
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 Bill, aye.
Aye. Anybody opposed? The motion carries. The minutes are approved. Moving on to item 3, public meeting dates. Do these dates work for everybody? Marta and her entire family was out for about 6 weeks with COVID, so that's the reason for the changes. The dates work for everybody?
I'm good. This is Mike Conway.
Okay.
Bill, yes.
Great.
This is Dale. It's okay. They're all okay with me.
Okay. Stephen, does that work for you as well?
I will make them work.
Okay. Then we will move, if that's all good. Josie, we don't need to vote on that, do we?
No.
Okay. Moving on to item 4, Proton Green. Marta, do you want to go ahead and brief us on this?
Yes, absolutely. So Proton Green has recently, they were formerly known as Plateau Carbon, so some of the documentation or previous conversations may have regarded Proton Carbon in case anyone remembers that name from previous conversations, but now known as Proton Green, formerly Plateau Carbon, has recently acquired the assets from Kinder Morgan CO2 Company, LLC. The assets include 20 existing wells, and they have submitted all the appropriate documentation to the commission to process the transfer of these assets and operatorship of these assets. We've received the bond to cover the wells. We've received a release from Kinder Morgan, as well as an acceptance of responsibility letter from Proton Green. So all of the required documentation under 12.7.103C3 have been received, and the company requests that the commission discuss, consider, and possibly vote to approve the transfer of these assets and operatorship of these assets. And there are representatives from the company on the line in case you have any questions.
This is Chairman Thorwald. I have a question for the company.
Go ahead.
Can you tell us what you are planning on doing with these new assets?
Also, Mr. Chairman Thorwald, if the speaker could identify their name and position with the company, that would help Marta, the administrator, with the meeting minutes.
If you could give us your name and your position with the company.
Yes, Chairman Thornwell. My name is John Coates, and I am a vice president with chief technical officer with Proton Green here in Houston, Texas. Our immediate plan is to revisit or re-enter a couple of the existing wells and do some preliminary testing to make sure that we think we have what we think we have. And at that point, we would be proposing a development plan which will focus on the production of helium from the field. So unlike Kinder Morgan, whose primary objective at St. John was to produce carbon dioxide and build a pipeline across New Mexico to export the carbon dioxide into their system in the Permian Basin of Texas. Our intention is to produce and extract the helium from the reservoir and sell that in Arizona.
How do you intend to deal with the CO2 and the other product?
Yes, in our current plan, we will re-inject the CO2 back into the reservoir from where it came from and sequester it. We're currently in the process of applying for a Class 6 injection permit and to make St. John's a regional carbon capture storage hub, one of its kind in the Southwest. So we're very excited about that. We've been in contact with the senators, the congressional delegation, and the EPA, obviously, who are part of our application process. We're in the early stages of that, but that is our goal, and we look forward to trying to bring new economic opportunity to Apache County and to Arizona.
Do you expect any produced water from any of the wells, and if so, how will you be handling that?
Yes, the testing and that's one of the questions that we must answer. The testing that Kinder did showed that the produced water issue is very minimal from the initial testing. However, they had reached the very final stages of applying for a Class 1 injection well, a non-hazardous injection well, and we may well also do that for an abundance of caution. But we're open to new technologies. A lot of things have happened in the last 10 years, as you're well aware, in terms of technology and water treatment and carbon sequestration. I failed to mention, we're also talking to the Springerville power plant that is operated by Tucson Electric Power, which sits in the middle of the lease there at Springerville. It's a 1,700 megawatt plant who are facing some real pressure on continuing extending their operating life due to the nature of the coal-fired plant. And we fully intend, and we're working with them, talking to them about the potential of sequestering their emissions at St. John. That also includes the Coronado plant further north, 10 miles north of the Springerville plant. As you guys, I'm sure, know better than I, are operated by Salt River Partners, and they too have expressed a real interest in working together to turn St. John into a carbon sequestration hub. And I don't know if you remember, Chairman Thornwell, but we talked 6 or 7 months ago, talked with yourself and Marta, and had a very positive conversation, and you were extremely interested in the economic development of the area, and we would like to work with any and all Arizona regulatory bodies to help make that happen.
Thank you. Commissioners, does anybody have any questions for them?
This is Mike Conway. Just a quick question. What was the time frame of the drilling of the 28 wells? Was that back in the late 1970s?
Is that a question for me, Mr. Conway?
Yes, it is. Yeah.
Kinder's recent drilling, there were a couple of different episodes of development here at St. John. If you recall, there was a group called Ridgeway Petroleum, aka Enhanced Resources, who then sold the properties to Kinder Morgan, and now Kinder Morgan has sold the properties to Proton Green, or to Plateau Carbon, who is now same company, just different name, Proton Green. To answer your question, Tom White is on the line, who was with all of those entities, and can attest to the fact that most of the Kinder Morgan drilling was done in between 2011, I believe, and 2016. Tom, is that remotely accurate?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay.
Most of the enhanced oil wells have been plugged and abandoned. Kinder Morgan.
Tom, let me interrupt. Make sure you introduce yourself and your title.
I'm sorry, Thomas White, Operations Manager for Proton Green. And so, yeah, that's correct. Between 2011, 2016, Kinder Morgan did the majority of the wells that we currently hold.
Tom is located in Show Low, Arizona. So, and we have an office in Springerville that is our field office. We call it our field office. It's a perfectly nice office in Springerville, Arizona.
Commissioners, does anyone else have any questions before we vote on this?
Yes, this is Dale Nations.
Yes, sir. Pleasure to meet you, sir.
I probably should know, but what is the percentage of helium in the average well there?
Kinder Morgan and Ridgeway through the years sampled helium across the structure. As you know, Ms. Nations, it's a large field, approximately almost 28 miles long by 15 miles wide, and the helium concentration varies across the structure, but it varies from anywhere in the 0.1 to 0.2 range up to 1.5 to 1 3/4%. But sort of like the grocery business, it's an enormous resource, and so what it lacks in individual concentration, it has in scale. So the volumes and the deliverability of the wells demonstrated by Kinder Morgan have shown to us that it's a highly economic and despite the low concentrations, the ability to produce is highly economic. And helium, for those of you who don't know or are interested, helium is experiencing a tremendous resurgence, particularly in the United States. Supply is dwindling. The new industries such as electric vehicles, data storage centers, medical equipment, the space program, semiconductor manufacturing all require helium. And many of those industries, of course, are growing and booming in Arizona. We've been very pleasantly surprised by the outreach from in Arizona industries to learn more about the supply of helium. We've also been working with the Navajo Nation, talking to them. They have a very robust and interested helium program that they're trying to develop, and we want to share technology with them and pipeline plans and infrastructure. So we're very pleased with the way things have gone to date and the encouragement we've received from everyone Arizonan. It's probably a long-winded answer, Ms. Nations. I apologize.
Any other questions from the commissioners for Proton Green?
This is Dale again. Yeah, I'm concerned about what the process is for stripping the helium from that carbon dioxide. You obviously have to produce the carbon dioxide in any formation water to have access to the helium. So obviously you have that in your plant.
Yes. The process is to extract the helium. Comes to the gas stream comes to the surface like any other well. It is then goes through a dehydration process where the water is removed. Any water in the gas stream is removed, and the helium is separated from the carbon dioxide through a pressure swing absorption process, which is a no moving parts molecular sieve, essentially. Helium molecules have a very different size than carbon dioxide molecules, and hence can be sieved out of the gas stream. The helium is then collected in is siphoned off, if you will, and collected in trailer tubes and trucked away from the site. The carbon dioxide is then returned into the earth from where it came.
Thank you.
You bet. Happy to give you guys a field tour. If you want to come and visit our operation, we'd love to show you what we're doing. And we're currently working with utilities there, the Navapache Electric Co-op. We're putting new power lines in, and we'd love to have you out for a visit if you have time.
Thank you. Any other questions?
Hey, Frank, this is Joe Dixon, the State Land Department. I don't know if anybody else is on for State Land or not here, David Haig or anybody, but Land Department's been working on transferring and assigning all of the various oil and gas leases on the unit agreement into the Plateau Carbon name there too. So, we've been proceeding along with that there too. But I kind of one question here too, real quick for the carbon sequestration thing. I kind of remember something the Geological Survey was working on, some kind of a plan or some kind of a carbon sequestration program with another power plant up there too. And I think somebody said that the carbon sequestration went along with the surface estate or the surface rights. Do you know if that's correct there, John?
Well, it's a little more complicated. Obviously there's several folks who are involved, including the mineral owners, the pore space owners. There's a surface component connected to the pore space. So yes, there are multiple, and that's dependent on the state, of course, on the state, federal, or fee lands. All have a say. Yes. I'm not our land manager, so I'll defer to them for a more detailed discussion on that.
Chairman, this is Dale Nations. I have a motion.
Proceed, Dale.
I move that the Oil and Gas Commission approve the asset transfer request from Proton Green, actually from Kinder Morgan to Proton Green, including operatorship. So that's it.
Do we have a second for that motion? Do we have
Bill,
discussion?
second.
Bill, would you repeat?
Bill, second.
Second. All in favor, say aye. Well, anyway, excuse me, any further discussion? Okay, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Bill, aye.
Aye.
Dale, aye.
Aye.
Conway, aye.
Aye. Any nays? Hearing none, the motion carries. The transfer is approved. Moving on to item 5, Pentadome Operating LLC. Marta, could you brief us on this?
So I actually received communication from Pentadome Operating yesterday afternoon, and they requested that they are not ready to proceed with a vote from the commission yet on the transfer of this asset, and that they would ask that we move this item to the next commission meeting at the end of March. And so I intend to do that, but since we have it on the agenda, I'll just give a quick update for the commissioners so that you know the status of this. Pentadome Operating reached out to the commission with interest of transferring the rare earth exploration 12-1. Just for a refresher, this is one of the wells that I believe the fall of 2020, the commission voted to forfeit the bond on the rare earth 12-1 and the 28-1 for the plugging and abandonment of those wells. And the commission's been in the process of completing that work since then. And so we have received a letter of release from Rare Earth Exploration for this well, the 12-1, and the company has been working with state land to transfer the lease. But as I mentioned before, they said that they're not quite ready to send in a letter of acceptance, and they're completing their due diligence, and they'll be in touch soon. But they do intend to continue moving forward with the process.
Commissioners, do you have any questions for our administrator on this?
Mr. Chairman, this is Commissioner Cooper. I have no problem with the concept of continuing the matter, but I do have some concerns about voting on a matter with no application submitted, no new bond or any organizational report. So if they're coming back the next meeting and we don't have any paperwork before us to review, I'm going to have some reservations about having a discussion and even considering approval of a transfer.
So noted.
Understood.
Any other questions or comments, discussion on this? Hearing none, let's move on to the next item, 6, report by the Oil and Gas Administrator. Administrator Houghton, would you please proceed?
Absolutely. All right, I will start by giving an update on drilling and completions activity since the last meeting. Some of the latest updates. Most recent, Desert Mountain Energy submitted an application for the McCully 1-1. That application was approved, and the company has begun drilling operations of the well. They sent me an update this morning, and I haven't had a chance to look at it, but last week's update was that they were having some technical difficulties with the rig, but they intended to get back to drilling very soon on that one. Then they also have submitted 2 additional applications in the last week, the McCully 10-1 and the McCully 3-1. I'm in the process of reviewing those applications, but they have not yet been approved, but they are in process and have been submitted. Next would be an update on the Pinta South 22-5 SD State, the plugging and abandonment of that well. The well was successfully plugged on January 5th, and all of the required paperwork and documentation has been submitted to the commission on that one. Next would be the 5 Ranger plugging and abandonment applications that were approved. Ranger has successfully plugged all 5 of those wells, and as of this morning, I received all of the required documentation and paperwork on those as well. So everything for those 5 wells has been successfully submitted to the commission.
Commissioners, do you have any questions for our administrator on any of those items? Let's move on to B then.
Okay. I want to give the commissioners an update on the federal funding opportunities that we've been discussing the last couple meetings. Since the last meeting, a lot has moved forward with respect to the infrastructure bill that was passed. With respect to what we have done, the work that we have done, we had submitted our letter of intent to the Department of Interior back on December 29th of 2021. And since then, we've received an update from the Department of Interior regarding eligibility for phase 1 funding. And Arizona was noted for phase 1 to be eligible for $26.262 million for plugging and abandonment of orphaned wells. I've included a link here if anyone is interested with respect to the press release from the Department of Interior. This press release gives the information for all of the states that submitted letters of intent for these types of programs for plugging of orphaned and abandoned wells. Additionally, some information with respect to that phase 1 eligibility. With respect to the formula grant, it breaks it down in this press release, and we are eligible for $1.262 million of formula grant money, but they did say that we are eligible for a $25 million initial grant. So that is the large, there's 2 types of initial grants within this infrastructure bill, a small grant of $5 million and then a larger initial grant of $25 million. And they said that Arizona is eligible based on our letter of intent to apply for the $25 million initial grant. An update on timing with respect to the actual applications and when we would see this funding. The latest information that we've been given through our coordination with the Interstate Oil and Gas Conservation Compact, they've been coordinating with the Department of Interior about the whole application process and relaying all of that information to the states. And the latest information that we received was that they're expecting guidance on the application process for the initial grants. So both the small and large initial grants, they expect that guidance within the next month. We were told that at the end of January, so we're anticipating that guidance for the application process by the end of February.
Administrator Hoden, don't we have a conference with them on the 17th if any of the other commissioners want to join?
Believe it's the 16th. There is a meeting and that meeting is with the Interstate Oil and Gas Conservation Compact to discuss best practices for plugging of orphaned wells. And so it's to get everyone on the same page, all of the states, in terms of the practices in which they're going to use to plug these wells, so there's consistency and create a bit of a standard. Obviously, each state has their own rules and requirements for plugging, but the federal government is giving some guidance on those standards as well. And I'm happy to share that invite with the commissioners.
Any questions from the commissioners on this so far?
This is Mike Conway. Marta, could you at some point send around that URL? I can't capture it off of this screen.
Oh yeah, I'm sorry. I thought I had sent it to all of the commissioners already, but I will send it again as soon as we get off this call today.
It should. This is Chairman Thorwald. It should be in the email that you received with the agenda on it. It's in that.
I can send it again, no problem. I'll elaborate a little bit more and continue in terms of discussing timeline. So with respect to the initial grants, just so that everyone knows, the deadline to apply, so we have not received the guidance on how to apply yet, but there is already a deadline for when you must apply by, and that deadline is May 15th. So at the very latest, we will have submitted our application for that $25 million initial grant by May 15th. And then the indication that I've received in terms of timeline on receipt of those funds is within 30 days of receipt of the application. So it's a very, very quick turnover time for the receipt of the application. Just a little bit more information to give to the commissioners is that the timeline for allocation of the funds of the large grant, so of the 25 million, is that you must allocate these funds within 90 days of receipt. So it is a very, very tight timeline for us to build out a project scope and allocate those funds. So kind of that jumps us onto the next one. So we had discussed at the last commission meeting some of the preliminary historical well review that Jim Ballard helped us conduct. He helped complete that review, and that review was used in our letter of intent that was submitted to identify wells that did not have documentation of proper plugging. And so my hope is that Jim, he's expressed interest, and I haven't had an opportunity to just discuss this further with him, but my hope is that he's going to help me with the preliminary scope and build out exactly what we need to do. And then we've been working with DEQ, ADOA, and a couple other entities with respect to figuring out how we staff up, how we look, how are we going to handle spending these funds and allocating these funds in this timeline. So this is something the chairman and myself have already begun these conversations, and just so that is in process, but just wanted to let everybody know, given the tight timeline on that. Additionally, in terms of timelines, the formula grant, so the additional $1.262 million, we were told that the guidance for that application process will follow shortly after the initial grant application. And so we anticipate definitely by June having guidance on that next portion of the funds. In the announcement, you will also see that there's a little bit of additional fund eligibility if you look at the total eligibility of the state, and Arizona's total eligibility is just over 29 million. So it appears as an additional 3 million that we may be eligible for in a phase 2, but we have not received any guidance on phase 2 at this point. And so that is where we are with respect to the federal funding project. Any other questions?
Administrator Hoden, Commissioner Thorwald, couple thoughts or questions. One, the allocation of funds doesn't mean we have to spend those funds. Is that correct?
Yes.
During that 90 days. How long of time is it that we have to spend the funds?
They have not given us a full deadline. The deadline that I have written down was for the smaller grant. So I have written down for the smaller grant they gave through 2030. So it was approximately 8 to 9 years. And so we're assuming a similar deadline, but I don't have it written down. So I will have to check on that one.
And what can these funds, what are these funds allowed to be spent on?
So there's a lot of this is still in process of being determined and being identified. So I won't say anything with complete confidence. Obviously, those funds, they absolutely can be used for the plugging of orphaned and abandoned wells. But our understanding is that a portion of these funds can be used. So 10% of the initial grant, that large initial grant, can be used for administrative purposes. We are also under the impression that it will be allowed to be used for reporting that will be required based on this program. And so with that reporting, that would require development of additional systems and potentially something like a web portal where we would have operators and the state submitting documentation for the federal government. But there's a lot, and updates to the website for submittal. All of these things may fall under eligibility, but again, we haven't received firm guidance on that, and I'm sure that's part of why it's taking a little while for them to give us guidance on the application process, because they're working on finalizing all of that language. But I will relay it as soon as I hear more.
Okay.
This is Dave.
Go ahead, Dale. Commissioner.
I have a question, Marta. Marta, what's the number of wells that have been orphan wells that have been identified in this review?
So I will say it's a prelim. Yeah, you can go ahead.
Yeah, total number is what I have in mind, estimated or total.
So the total preliminary number, and I'll say it's preliminary because our investigation with Jim's help has been based on looking at the historic well files and determining what documentation was submitted for those wells. What do we have receipt? What do we have records of? And so through that investigation, preliminary investigation, we determined that 245 wells lack documentation of any proper plugging. This includes wells, oil wells, gas wells, geothermal wells, water wells. There a portion of those wells were supposedly converted to water wells. That's why I call them water wells. But we don't actually have there's a lot of lack of documentation in some of these much older wells. And when I say much older, I'm talking 1950s and earlier. There's a lot of wells. And so the actual project scope will have to go into not only just looking at what records we have, but actually going to those well sites, determining the current status of those wells, and determining what remediation work needs to be done in order to have it properly plugged.
Another question. So there's no, is there a requirement to show that there actually is gas leakage from any of these wells, or
no?
Is that not a factor?
It's not a factor.
Okay.
The guidance that we received from our conversations with the Department of Interior as well as the AZOGCC is that any wells would be eligible for these funds. And so, like I mentioned, geothermal wells as well, storage wells, etc. The funds can be used for all of these things. So many states across the US are applying for these funds for many different types of activities.
Administrator Hoden, Commissioner Thorwald, is this also funds usable for surface if there needs to be any remediation on surface areas around the well?
I will say yes, but that I would want to look further into the language. Obviously, we will be reading all of the language to determine exactly what would be covered. My impression from the conversations that I have had would be that yes, that would be covered, but I would want to confirm that before I give you a definitive answer.
How many wells had to be looked at to narrow it down to this 200 and something?
With Jim's help, he reviewed all 1,200 well file records that we have.
We should compliment Jim, because Marta could not have done this on her own, and without his exhaustive input and time, we would not have been able to get these funds. So I just want to thank Mr. Ballard right now for all his efforts.
I would agree with that. Thank you.
Commissioners, is there any other questions with regard to the federal funding opportunities that Marta has talked to us about so far? Hearing none, let's move on to the the website redesign process.
So an update on the website. I will be honest, with me being sick and being out, there were some delays, as well as with everything that was going on in December to get those letters of intent. My priority shifted from getting some of the documentation finalized for the website. And so I am behind, but getting back on track with that. So I do anticipate the new website rollout to be very soon, but I'll be honest, it's my fault that it's delayed at this point. But some updates that I do have are with respect to our well viewer on the website. Our intern, Brooke Bolger, has been helping us. She's back this spring. She was with us last fall, and she's come back for the spring semester as well to continue her work on the GIS well viewer. And so the work that she conducted in the fall semester was to organize a bunch of the well files and to get herself familiar with what's in our well files. And so she has, in the month of January, added 10 new wells to the well viewer, and intends, and with those 10 new wells, she's using a new file structure to make everything a bit more searchable on the well viewer. Instead of one giant folder for the well files, she's dividing it into subgroups, and so documentation specific to different components of drilling of the well. So for example, application to drill would be one component, drilling, completions, production, these things would all be separated now to make it a bit more searchable when looking through a well file folder. And so through the remainder of her spring project, she'll continue going through more of the well records and updating, moving backwards through time. And then additionally, she's working with the ADEQ's GIS team to learn how to add additional search functionality to our well viewer. And so the goal is she's updating some of the background data attached to those wells. Specifically, some important things we're trying to add would be searchability via well status. So we're hoping that you can, in the future, look up a well based on its status. So if a well is active, you should be able to search all active wells in the state of Arizona. And then as well as well type. And so we're hoping to be able to identify wells as helium wells, oil and gas wells, geothermal wells, etc. And so make those searchable functionality. And then additionally, she's working on adding some layers, some map layers into our viewer so that hopefully the goal is that we can toggle on and off some surface layers, so state land, federal lands, and then maybe the goal is to make the map a bit more useful for everyone when looking around the state at what's been drilled and where it's been drilled. And so that is in progress, and she's been making a lot of progress on the work she's been doing.
Commissioners, do you have any questions for our administrator on the website?
Mike Conway,
It
sounds like you're making great progress on it. And I like the idea of the viewer being updated and having new functionality.
Commissioner Nations?
Yes, I agree. I wanted to commend them for this work. I've accessed the website myself just to see if I could locate a well and get information relative to it, name and location, and what we're missing, and it's impossible, I'm sure, to show what initial production data would be, if any, for a given well.
So with the new website rollout, one of the things I am hoping to do, obviously production data was previously prior to 2015 posted on the website. My hope is that production data moving forward will be back on the website, and you don't need to submit a request to DEQ for the production data. And so the goal is to have, when all the monthly production data comes in via email, it'll be a monthly upload to the website moving forward. It won't be initial production. That's not something that I have in a simple manner that I could update per well, but at the very least, the production data that we do have would be posted to the website.
Any further questions for our administrator? Not hearing any, let's move on to D, rules update. Administrator Hoden.
Some updates, not a lot has changed, but still the new deadline for the 5-year rule review based on the extension being approved is now March 30th. So working on trying to get together a 5-year rule review, but we are considering another potential 120-day extension given the priority of the federal funding applications, but determining how much of it we can get done by March 30th, and we will keep you posted at the next commission meeting if we do apply for an additional extension. No changes on the proposed statutory changes, but as I've mentioned at the past meeting, a lot of the rule package has been put on hold due to the need to change the statutory language prior to submitting a new rule package. And so we are continuing to work on drafting some of those proposed statutory changes, and then determining what the timeline for getting those approved would be. Concurrently, we will continue working on the rule package based on those statutory changes and other rule package changes that will be needed. As everybody knows, the rule package has been being worked on for many years, and so there's a lot of a lot in there that's already, a lot of work that's already been done. But we just want to make sure that that everything that needs to be changed is going to be changed. And so what we've identified is that some of those things in statute need to be changed first to make the rulemaking most effective.
This is Commissioner Thorwald. I want to add to that I instructed Marta to put that in the secondary place to getting the federal funds, because there was just so much work to be done on getting the federal funds that there wasn't enough bandwidth for her to be able to do both. We needed to get both done, and once we get through this, we have it's going to be later in the year, because we'll have a crush to do everything within that 90 days to get everything done. And in fact, within that time frame, we may have to. In fact, if any of the commissioners have any additional time to devote to this separately, we may ask you for your help if you're willing to volunteer for some of that with putting some of these scopes of things together. Any other questions for the administrator on the rule package?
I have one more thing to add. I just kind of, I know
Marta,
that.
Identify yourself too.
Oh, okay. Marta Hoden, administrator. One additional thing to add with respect to the rulemaking package status. I just wanted to open, and please let me know if this is okay. I think this is the appropriate place to bring this up. I know at the last commission meeting, Commissioner Feierabend asked to discuss bonds. And I think if this is okay, we can open up the floor to give me any suggestions or any input with respect to the rulemaking package that I could add if any of the commissioners want to give their input or have a discussion regarding bonds. I can take notes and include that in the rulemaking. Is that acceptable, Josie, to talk about that here?
Marta, it's acceptable for commissioners to provide input directly to you without discussion and action.
Okay. Thank you.
Commissioners, if you have things, just send it to email our administrator. Any other questions for the administrator on this? Not hearing any. Let's move on to E, the web portal. Administrator Hoden.
I kind of already gave, there's not really an update on the web portal, but I kind of discussed that a little bit with respect to the federal funding. We are looking at whether there's a possibility that those federal funds could be eligible to be used for something like a web portal. And so we will continue looking at that as they identify what we can spend that money on. And then that's all I have for that one. Is it okay that I jump to F?
Yeah, any questions on the portal? I'd like to make a comment on that. We have done in the past design of a web portal that would have to be updated if we have to do the reporting to the federal government through the website as well. That's the only other comment that I would make. Any questions on the web portal? Hearing none, let's move on to F, procedures manual.
The only update that I have with respect to standard operating procedures is that recently we, with the help of Assistant Attorney General Josie Belgian, she helped draft a document this past week with respect to bonds and financial assurance. We did receive a request from an operator to submit a bond in the form of a certificate of deposit. This isn't a form of bond that we had received or that I have any documentation of receiving in the past. And so we did not have a form currently created. I did send that out to the commissioners, the new template, and it will be posted to the website for other operators who have any interest. But I just wanted to let you know that new template was created and will be used moving forward.
Any questions for on the procedures manual? Hearing none, let's move on to the report by the chairman. Sorry, I had to clear my throat there. There's been a number of meetings of the Interstate Oil and Gas Compact, the AZOGCC, on this particular subject, and they're continuing to do briefings. They have actually been designated by the government, the federal government, as the key liaison to point of contact, whatever, to work with the Department of Interior on this, on the funding, and all of the things associated with that. So they have been helping us step through this entire process very effectively. The other thing that has been going on with the AZOGCC is discussions about funding of oil and gas, the oil and gas industry, and how to deal with that and the decrease in funds available to the oil and gas industry, and whether to the balance between promoting the oil and gas industry and the regulatory process. And that is still an ongoing discussion that we have with regard. And commissioners, as I go through this, if you have any questions, please interrupt me. The new item B, the New Mexico Produced Water Research Consortium. We've been a member of that, and they've been talking about, they've got a number of desalination test plants in New Mexico. And the Center for National Research on Desalination is in New Mexico. And we've been invited to come over and take a look at any of these sites. They would be happy to show us around and talk about what's going on with that. And that group also has created a small new entity, a subgroup out of that we're part of. And it's to look at what the different needs are from all of the states with regard to produced water. And they've determined that there's only a small number of differences. They originally thought there would be quite a few different things that each state would need, but there aren't. So they're going to produce a standardized document with the information in it, and we're part of that. In addition to that, they connected us with another group out of Massachusetts, who we have introduced to some of the operators here. This group is funded by the Department of Interior, and it is to test new technology with regard to desalination and of the produced water, specifically produced water, and to do it by with solar power, and to have these facilities to be portable, that can be literally on site where the operation is occurring. And these are scalable. They are indicating that we will have a test project potentially here in Arizona within the year for that. Moving on to the item C, the budget. Go ahead.
Question? Okay.
Go ahead with it.
Yeah,
is this?
Bill. It's Bill.
Yes.
I'd be very interested in taking a tour of those sites, you know, in sort of near future, immediately near future. Personally, I would be. I don't know if they'd be willing to do one person, if there are other members of the commission that would like to go visit those, but I personally would. So Marta, I think I'll talk to you about this after the meeting. Does that work?
Administrator Houghton, would you coordinate and send him the Commissioner Farmer, Robin, the contact information, and check with the other commissioners to see if a group would like to go?
Yeah, I can coordinate this for sure.
Thank you. Not that you have anything else to do. I'm being facetious in saying that, of course. The budget. We've been working, I've been working with the director, and so is Marta, with other staff at DEQ with regard to staffing and planning and how we handle the federal funds coming in and Department of Administration and and also with the governor's office, and they've been doing the same thing, handling that money and putting it in a particular location. Where that's going to go, how we do the contracting out is also a whole new set of things that we have to deal with. And we've been talking about that. We started these discussions back in August of last year, and they are now intensifying at DEQ on how we are able to move this forward. And with regard to what we will be able to do and when we will be able to do it, because of course this 90-day thing is coming up very soon. With regard to item C, the Office of Navajo and Hopi Indian Relocation, there's been no further change. There's been communications from the O'Neill people to the different entities involved, but they've not received any responses that I know of to date. We have not been copied on anything. I've already talked to about F. Dale, item E. Dale, do you have anything to report?
No, I don't. This is Dale Nations. I have, excuse me, nothing new to report, but I do want to commend you, Marta and Frank, and the rest of everybody for all this good work. It's good to see so much attention paid to plugging and abandoning, and in addition to just issuing drilling permits. A lot of activity, and I'm really happy about the use of the CO2 field, St. John's CO2 field. I'm excited about that. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Nations. Item G, legislation affecting the Oil and Gas Commission. I asked Marta to send out legislation that I've been following that could have impact on the Oil and Gas Commission, and it relates to oil and gas and water that's going on. And some of it's a little remote with regard to the water, but others are more timely. The material that was sent out is the actual current word. It concludes the actual current wording of what that legislation is, and then the summary at the top. If you click on those links, it'll probably take you to LegiScan, and you may have to join that. LegiScan is free if you're doing it just within the state of Arizona. I like it. It's easy to use. But there's 12 different pieces of legislation out there within the State House. Some of it is the standard no fracking pieces of legislation that we've seen over the number of years. Is there any questions about that legislation from any of the commissioners? Hearing none, let's move on to item H. I asked Marta to put this in. I have no desire. I would like to continue as chairman of the commission, and but I thought that we have some new members. I've been in the position now for a number of years, and I thought that the commissioners should at least have a discussion about whether we want to have elections or not for the chairman and vice chairman, and that's why I asked her to put it in. Commissioners, do any of you want to put your name in as for chairman?
Chairman Thorwald, this is Commissioner Cooper. When are you up for parole?
We don't have a time limit. Right now, I've been reappointed for 5 years as to the commission by the governor this year. And of course, they appointed me as to replace Dale as the liaison to the Interstate Oil and Gas Compact this year. So I'm still in the middle of it. I just thought it's been a while and we should at least talk about it.
Frank, this is Dale. Yeah, I agree we should have this as a discussion, but I would like to just recommend that you continue as chairman. Vice chairman is not too important, although I do appreciate the opportunity to have input, more so probably than just being a regular commissioner. So I just would like to endorse the concept of voting periodically for the chairman and vice chairman positions. And I would like to move that we continue as we are doing so now.
Is there any other comments or discussion from the commissioners? I don't think we need a vote on this. Do we, Josie?
Chairman Thorwald, if people would like to make nominations for new positions, you don't need to vote on it, but it's customary for boards and commissions to go ahead and vote if there's a nomination.
Okay. Is there, commissioners, is there any other, does anybody want to make a nomination, or do we want to continue as is? What's the feeling of the rest of the commission?
This is Dale. I would move that we continue as is.
This is
here.
Bill.
I agree.
Yeah, Bill, and I really like the progress we made on a number of things under you as chairman, Mr. Thorwald. So my feeling is let's continue as we are. We're moving forward, which is a good direction.
Any other discussion? Do we have a second on Dale's motion, Commissioner Nation's motion?
Bill, second.
Okay. All in favor, say aye.
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 Bill, aye.
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 All opposed, say nay. The motion carries. Let's move on to item 8, call to the public. Is there anybody that would like to make any comments?
I would. My name is Noah Brujas. I'm a doctoral student at ASU. I've been working with many of the members on this call. I wanted to say that I'm really looking forward to the new well viewer and the new website. To make it so searchable sounds really helpful. And I'm also very curious to see how you'll manage to do the job of allocating funds and conducting the plugging itself in such a short time with so little staff. And I know you mentioned you're trying to hire more, so I'm looking forward to seeing how that plays out.
Thank you. Any other comments from the public? Hearing none, move on to item 9. There's anything we want to see in the future agenda? Commissioners, anything you want to see? I might add here that because Marta was sick, she did not continue for this meeting her briefing on each of the different topics, but she intends to do that on the next agenda and continue that in the future.
Bill, the only single point I'd bring up again is I'd like to kind of keep that bonding on the agenda until we get that reviewed and make any changes if needed. So that's my only point.
We can add that to the next agenda, next meeting's agenda.
This is Mike Conway. Frank, I think you mentioned several minutes ago that the New Mexico group was looking at a project here in Arizona, desalinization project here in Arizona next year. I would like to learn more about that if that's the case.
I'll ask Marta, I'll send you the material if you don't have it, and so you can send it out to the commissioners.
Okay.
And the New Mexico group has actually put us in touch with a group in Massachusetts that's working on this. Any other items for the agenda? In fact, we can put that on the agenda for next time for a more in-depth discussion, and we could ask them to join us for that meeting as well. One thing that we might want to put on for the agenda is any what I'm thinking of, and I'm not sure how to put it in what the proper terms. We have to have a structure and a working group to deal with these funds that will be coming in, and any suggestions that you might have or help with regard to what we should have on the agenda to help Marta facilitate that and to help me facilitate that, I think would be good. So if you have anything, please email that to Marta so we can move forward. Is there anything else for number 9? Moving on to number 10, is there any announcements? Hearing that, let's move on to item 12, adjournment. Do I hear a motion to adjourn?
So motion, Mike Conway here.
Second?
Bill, second.
All in favor, say aye.
Bill, aye.
Hi, this is Dale.
Frank, aye.
Mike, aye.
Aye.
It's unanimous. The meeting is adjourned. Thank you all.
Thank you.